work on language policy in Mexico. And it made me reflect how indigenous languages are an issue to brag about but not to care about.
Is it not working?
No.
I think we
Evaluate the degree of validity of indigenous languages in Mexico by contrasting the provisions of Article 7 of the General Law of Linguistic Rights of Indigenous Peoples with the real experience of the speakers, not only indigenous speakers, but also Spanish speakers. Okay, so I have 5 research questions. The first one says, to what extent are indigenous languages recognized and accepted in public procedures and services according to the experience of the speakers? What are the differences between legal discourse and reality in the implementation of language policies in Mexico? And how does proficiency in Spanish influence the accessibility of official procedures and the political and social legitimacy of citizens? How does Spanish function as a symbolic capital within Mexican society, affecting those who speak indigenous languages, and what strategies or policies could guarantee greater inclusion and equity for indigenous language speakers in public spaces? I follow I utilize 3 complementary qualitative techniques as my partners, well, as my classmates: the thematic analysis, the deductive coding, and matrix. Now, for the results, all participants stated that indigenous language matter because they are part of Mexican culture, and they recognize also some laws, like the General Law of Indigenous indigenous languages rights, and some public institutes such as INALI, the Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas, and the INPI, el Instituto Nacional de Pueblos Indígenas. But as it says, well, no. But nevertheless, these advancements, participants cannot deny that there is a legal gap between what it says in the law and what is implemented in reality. As participant 2 says, the law clearly states that indigenous people must be attended to in their own languages and must be given access to public services in their own language. However, out of 100%, I believe that only 10% of this happens. That translates to partial recognition and also symbolic recognition, as participant 2 says. And here, what the federal government says has a great impact. That is, if the president says the indigenous peoples are the essence of our country, they are the culture, the root of Mexico, the fact that the president of the republic says it does have an effect. But go to communities and they don't know exactly what they need. And the government does not look back at his past. If I already did a policy that didn't work out, why would we do the same again? The implementation, it is not feasible. Some participants state that recognizing and integrating all these languages are not feasible, because why would they do a sign, like an exit, in all languages recognized as national languages? Also, there is a lack of commitment by the government. As I said before, it is only symbolic recognition to indigenous languages. And also, policies doesn't have a follow-up, so they are not measurable. Also, the Spanish as a de facto language that is used in all official texts and public discourse create a better sense of effectiveness of these policies regarding indigenous languages, because if they say indigenous languages are as valid as indigenous languages, why are they not here? Why we don't see them? This project, I want to show you. The General Law of Linguistic Rights of Indigenous People say that indigenous languages shall be valid as well as Spanish for any matter or procedure of a public nature, as well as for full access to management services and information, public matters or procedures. But participant 2 says, linguistic rights are not going to come to us automatically. we have to force them to obey that law. That is the reason why indigenous peoples are always and will always be in a state of struggle. That happened, it has happened, and I'm sure it will continue to happen at least for a few 2 or 3 decades. So that said, even though there has been advancements in indigenous languages policies, there is a implementational gap of these policies. That is, in each level of institutes,